One rhyme at a time, unpacking the meaning and the muse with the Poetic Diva is podcast programming that reminds us of the connection between poetry and mental and emotional wellness. This program has been brought to you by Rhyme and Chat Interactive Poetry Organization, thanks to the financial and technical support of Lyndhurst Foundation, Arts Build, Community Foundation, Direct Connection Media, Edney Innovation Center, and Gold Nook Publishing. So, whether you are a poetry enthusiast or simply someone seeking inspiration and understanding, join us as we unravel the threads of creativity and introspection, one rhyme at a time. Welcome to the conversation. So welcome to One Rhyme at a Time, Unpacking the Meaning and the Muse podcast with the Poetic Diva, where poetry meets mental wellness right here in the heart of Chattanooga, Tennessee. I am your host, the Poetic Diva, and I am thrilled to embark on this poetic healing journey with you. As in every episode, we are being visited by a poet and a mental health professional. Today, we are going to be talking about narcissism, psychopathy, sociopathy, coping, and moving on. Today, we are joined by poet Jamnjaq. Jacquelyn Johnson Atkerson, poetically known as Jamnjaq, is the youngest of 5 children, mother of Jamiqua McGlone, and the proud grandmother of Ambrielle and Courtney. She is a native Chattanoogan and spoken word artist who has been writing prose and poetry for most of her life. And it all began as a coping mechanism. Jamnjaq writes from actual experiences, so her poetry is very personal, passionate, and poignant. She prays that her poetic pieces encourage and soothe others. Her poetry is published in several anthologies, including Rhyme and Chat Interactive Poetry Organization's Reboot 2022 anthology, their Why We Write 2023 anthology, which was actually dedicated to her, and their 2024 anthology entitled Homecoming. She is most proud of her recently published book entitled Faith Over Fear, My Story, published through Gold Nook Publishing and available for purchase through Amazon.com. She knows from personal experiences that writing changes lives and enables her and others to move beyond pain and trauma. She recognizes that she is a work in progress and endeavors to be a better person in all aspects of her life. She sees her creative talent as a challenge that allows her to grow, be encouraged, and to be an encourager. She truly has no choice in the matter. She must write about life. Yes, the positive and the negative aspects. We welcome Jamnjaq to One Rhyme at a Time. Clap it up. So actually, this is a poem that Jamnjaq and I wrote together. So listen in as she shares her poem, Choosing Me, featuring the Poetic Diva on One Rhyme at a Time. When a new love steps in, you are all aglow. But please look for the signs because you really don't know the person, their background, who they are inside. You don't know the part of the person that they are trying to hide.
I met this guy and he makes me smile every day. He's pecan brown, tall, witty, smart. He's been attentive and loving. My heart he sways.
They all start out that way.
I think this one could be the real deal because I love how he makes me feel. He calls and texts often with sweet little things to say, just to say he's thinking about me all night and day.
You know, new love can be an amazing thing, but take it slow. They first introduce you to their representative, and then the true man will start to show.
I've been without a man for 15 years, without a man or even the desire for one. I've been doing just fine. To be honest, I'm not sure what's going on. I wasn't looking for a man, not sure I even want to go steady. But the way this man is making me feel, I think I might be ready.
A predator can smell fresh, vulnerable meat and will do whatever he can to attract them. Don't be deaf and blind to the signs because you don't want to be his next victim. I don't want to bring doom and gloom. But in these new relationships, you can't let your guard down too soon. All I can say is look for the signs, because all that glitters ain't gold. Protect your heart, your mind, and your body, because having a man ain't worth losing your soul.
Now, there was this time that he just disappeared. He wouldn't respond to texts, wouldn't answer my call. It was weird, because for several days, I didn't hear a peep from him at all. My mind started spinning. Is he sick? Is he dead? Was it something I did? Was it something I said? Why can't he take a few seconds just to text me? What in the world could have him so busy?
I've been through that before. Sounds familiar to me. This man had me all in my head and my feelings by up and ghosting me. Had me thinking it was something I'd done, but I wasn't the problem. He was the one.
Then, after 5 days, he called like nothing had happened, like he didn't disappear. And I was so glad that he was okay, but a reason I needed to hear. He had me so concerned, I was blaming myself. Did someone else close to him die? Was something happening with his health? I asked him what had happened, and then I felt like a jerk. Because when he responded, all he said was, work.
See, I remember feeling abandoned and misunderstood. I was losing my confidence. I didn't want to be a nag, but his reason just didn't make any sense. What I learned was that was a way to control me. He'd be around, but I still felt lonely. I'd get upset and he wouldn't console me. Having sex was the only time he'd hold me. I was losing me in him, and I longed for the old me.
We dated for 6 months, and I found it strange that in all that time, I'd never been to his place. He always came to mine. He met my children, my family, and friends, but there was always some kind of excuse when it came to me meeting his kin.
Watch to see who's been doing the giving. It isn't complicated. Be open and honest, but make sure that it's reciprocated. Because a man who is secretive with parts of his life may be hiding a dangerous past or maybe even a wife.
And then he did it again, just came up missing. I was tired of being treated like my feelings were non existent. I didn't let him off the hook this time. I asked questions and I persisted. I reminded him of the queen that I am and that I deserve better treatment. He just looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language and he didn't understand what I meant. I reminded him of the sweet things he said, the whisperings he whispered during our times in bed. I realized when faced with fight or flight, he sprouts feathers and flies away, or he sits in total silence with absolutely nothing to say.
A man who truly loves you needs no reminder that you're his queen. He will acknowledge your feelings without being brash or mean. A man who loves you will not break you, and he sure won't leave you broken. He will acknowledge you, your position in his life, and the words that you have spoken. A healed and healthy man doesn't behave this way. It sounds like you found yourself a textbook narcissist.
And now he's trying to change how I talk and gets upset about my vast vocabulary. He says I'm showing off or trying to make him look bad. He tells me my big words are unnecessary. So now I'm overthinking everything that I say because I don't want him to feel that way. And when I forget and talk in a normal way, he calls me a show off and then shuts down for the rest of the day.
Ever heard of gaslighting? That's exactly what they do, to play victim and to make it seem like something's wrong with you. Then, when they mistreat you, they feel justified because they've already shown you that they don't value you. And if they said they do, they lied. Because a narcissist only cares about themselves. They lack empathy and can't put themselves in your shoes. All they can do is use and abuse. And they fool you and the rest of the world by following social cues.
One day, after he made me angry, he brought me flowers and a gift. He started talking about telling his mom about us because I'm the one he wants to spend the rest of his life with. He called me his black diamond, rare and treasured, a valuable asset. Yet, to this day, his mom and I still haven't met.
You just got blown up in a love bomb. It happens after a fight. They say all the right things and do all the right stuff. And then they ask if they can spend the night. They will lie and pull out all the stops using their charm to woo you and taunt. You see, it's all about them controlling you and getting what they want.
I've even been driving through this neighborhood and watching his place. And even though I haven't seen anyone, this behavior is such a disgrace. Sometimes I come through around 2 or 3 and he's not home, but he's not with me. Now, where could he be? So on the nights that I spent alone on someone else's pillow, he was laying his head. Is she smarter? Is she cuter? Have more money? A bigger booty? How can he love me and care for her? My heart aches. My soul is worn. This is so out of character. At least out of character for me. Him with another woman, I just didn't see. I was hurting, and soul water flowed freely from my eyes. Why can't he just tell the truth and forego the lies?
They will even make you doubt yourself and your womanhood. But trust, what the devil means for bad, God means for our good. That man may confuse you with his unfaithful stuff, but always remember that you are God's child and you, my queen, are enough. Stay true to your true self and don't ever allow yourself to lose sleep at night by driving by some man's house.
He's mistreating me. He's lying and he's cheating. I think I need to bring this to an end. But it's hard. It's so embarrassing. And he has really charmed my friends. Because on the outside, he is attentive and loving, and he treats me well. But behind closed doors, he's tearing me apart. And I feel like
hell. So be prepared when you try to go, because here's something else that I know. They will have you second guessing your decision to leave because your friends will not believe that he's hurting you the way that you say, because they've never seen or heard him treat you that way. He will even convince your family too that he is a perfect man for you.
Well, I've been praying about this relationship and my behavior and was led to seek counseling from a therapist. When I told them what had been going on, the first thing they said was that I was dealing with a narcissist. I had heard the term, but had no idea what it meant. They gave me some videos to watch, and when I did, it all began to make sense. Dear God, I need your help. This is not what you want from me. I need my peace. I need my life back. God, I just want to be free. I love that man. I cannot lie, but I must face the fact that I've got a soul tie. I've allowed a man in my heart that you never sent, and I know I need this veil of deceit to be rent. I've been doing things that aren't within your will. I've been feeling things that I'm not supposed to feel. I will no longer be defeated. I will no longer be mistreated. God, I am calling on you for strength and guidance. I can't do this by myself. Lord God, I'm pleading for your help.
You see, I've been where she is, and I've done what she's done, and learned that expecting a narcissist to change is like expecting the lame to run. Don't blame yourself. They are amazing actors who will have you coming out of character to play a role and lose your mind and maybe even your soul. I had to draw a hard line in the sand and declare that I won't lose myself over any man. The only way to heal is to cut him completely off. I've decided to do it and cut my loss.
I
I'm not answering his calls. I'm not answering his texts. I'm not riding by his house. I'm not giving him sex. I am reclaiming my life and my dignity and walking away a stronger woman because I'm choosing me. So, Jamnjaq, thank you for being here with us.
Thank you for letting me be here.
And I want to thank you for the opportunity to co-write that poem with you. So share with the audience a little bit about how that whole co-writing experience came to be.
Well, as the poem says, I found myself unknowingly involved with a narcissist. Had no idea what that was, didn't understand what was going on. I was trying to apply normal conversation treatments to something that is not normal. Um, so you and I talked. You had a similar experience. And I think we were talking about what I was going through and what you had been through. And you said, oh, that would be awesome for us to write a poem. And so I would write something, send it to you, you write something. And that's how the poem was birthed, how it was brought to fruition.
I really, really, really enjoyed that writing process
I
too.
did too.
Because the position that you were in figuring it out, and the fact that I had already walked that path.
Uh-huh.
And I think that by expressing it in such a creative way, in a poetic way, and being able to share the poem in different platforms will hopefully prick the hearts and minds of some of the people who are in the audience and kind of realize, oh my gosh, that's what I've been going through. That's what I've been dealing with. When you write, do you have like a certain purpose or goal in your writing for the reader, for the recipient of your poetry?
I write what I live.
Mm.
And I think that we're all blessed with certain gifts. And when you receive a blessing, it's not just for you, it's to share. And here I was, just mature, intelligent, educated woman, and got broke.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of young people, not just females, it happens to males too, that I couldn't keep it to myself. One, I'm going to write about it because I'm experiencing it. But I've learned, I got a daughter, I got a granddaughter, grandson, that we're supposed to pass on our wisdom. And as painful as it was, I wanted it documented. So when you said, let's do that, and then to find out, here's another intelligent, strong woman who's been through it. Actually, it made me feel good. Don't get mad at me, but it kind of made me feel good that I wasn't the only one. But see, a lot of times people go through things and they don't share it. So you think you out there in the sea all by yourself. You ain't got no flares.
Yeah. So have you written any other collaborative pieces like the one that you and I have done together?
I have not. That was a unique but enjoyable experience. I have not.
Yeah, and I've heard from some people that collaborating, like writing a collaborative piece is challenging in that, as artists, we're sensitive about our work. We're sensitive about our stuff. And then when you're writing with somebody else and they possibly make a suggestion about something that you've written or possibly take the story in a different direction. Did you have any type like egos type struggles as you were creating this piece?
We did not.
Yeah.
Or I did not. Because I think the reason I did not is because you've been there.
Yeah.
So you understood. And you are an encourager, you're a supporter. So we might have made grammatical changes, but you didn't try to change my story because it was my story and you recognize that.
Exactly. And I think that's really, really important to keep in mind when you are doing a collaborative piece with someone, especially when the subject matter is so close to the heart, is to be sure to honor the person's journey, to always honor their story, and to not try to change or manipulate that in any way. I think the relationship between the people who are collaborating is really, really important as well, so that they can honor the story that they're trying to tell and honor the person that they're working with in their journey as well.
even though we both walked that dark path, I think we both were thinking of how to present it in a way that resonated within people, but that was so powerful that it would prevent someone getting ready to go into a relationship to know what to look for. In a relationship, it's unfamiliar. Get out. And a lot of times we don't have those people in our lives.
That's true.
We don't have those people in our lives.
That's true.
I think we both, I know it was healing for me, and I think it was healing for you. And I remember the first time we read it, everybody identified with it, everybody wanted to copy. And I didn't take that, oh, we really did nothing. I thought that we achieved what we set out to do.
We set out to do. I agree with that. I agree with that. So if somebody is wanting to get in touch with Jamnjaq, how can they connect with you?
Well, I'm on Facebook as Jacquelyn Atkerson. I'm also on Instagram as Jacquelyn Atkerson. My email, Jackie J7 at EPBFI.com.
Well, thank you, Jamnjaq.
All right.
So thanks to Jamnjaq for sharing her poem, Choosing Me, and for giving us a deeper understanding behind the meaning and the muse of her poetry. The overarching theme of this poem was narcissism, and with May being Mental Health Awareness Month, it just seemed like a great time to get a better understanding of what narcissism is, as well as how narcissism relates to psychopathy and sociopathy. Are these terms interchangeable? And when faced with somebody who presents these characteristics, how do you cope? And how do you move on? We're going to talk about it with our guest and mental health professional, Katharine Perry. Before we do, it is important that I remind you that this podcast is not a substitute for therapy. It is a conversation, and it is intended to help remove the stigma of having meaningful conversations like this and to provide general information. Always seek the advice of your physician or qualified healthcare provider with any questions that you may have regarding your mental, emotional, and physical health. Now, with that being said, let's get a better understanding of narcissism, psychopathy, and sociopathy, and how to cope and how to move on. Katharine Perry is a licensed clinical social worker currently working as a therapist at Chattanooga Recovery Center. Katharine graduated magna cum laude and with honors from the University of Houston with a Bachelor's of Arts in Psychology. Katharine conducted research for Baylor College of Medicine at Menninger Psychiatric Clinic, focusing on emerging personality disorders in the adolescent treatment program. She then went on to complete a master's in child development from Tufts University in Boston, Massachusetts, and a postgraduate fellowship in infant parent mental health from the University of Massachusetts, Boston. Katharine worked in city government to launch an attachment-based early intervention service in New York City as a clinical program associate for the Administration of Children's Services. Katharine completed her Master's of Science in Social Work from University of Texas in Austin in 2021 and has been living and working in Chattanooga as a social worker since then. Please join me in welcoming Katharine Perry to One Rhyme at a Time. Oh, Katharine. What a conversation we need to have. Thank you so very much for being here with us.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Oh my goodness. So we are talking about narcissism and psychopathy and sociopathy. Like, what are the definitions and the differences between those things?
So the first thing that I wish everybody knew is that none of those things are actually mental health diagnoses. Those are features of different types of people with different types of mental health issues or without mental health illnesses can have. So the same way that you can have a cough, that you can have a cough for pneumonia, you can have a cough for just because you have a cough because of the allergies, you can have a cough because of cold. Sociopathy is going to be a feature that someone will have. These are people that are pretty kind of shallow, superficial, charming. So that's sort of how I think of sociopathy, or someone who we might call a sociopath. Psychopathy is going to be a pattern of disregard of the rights of others. So these are typically people who are, you're going to find a lot of those people sort of in the criminal justice system, history of maybe violence. And the narcissism is sort of it's a very complicated thing. So narcissism, I know a lot of people think that narcissism are people who are obsessed with themselves, but they're actually people who almost lack a self. We all have strategies to sort of learn who we are and what we mean. Narcissists sort of are almost like colanders. So you can pour and you can pour and you can pour and nothing will hold. And so there's an emptiness in them. And so that sort of is the primary motivation to what they use relationships for. So people can have features of narcissism without it being a defining characteristic. We all have a little bit of it. You know, children have a little bit of it. They're a little self-centered because they need to be.
Right.
Because they're learning about their world. They're learning how to expand their sense of identity, community, contextualizing themselves. But none of those are actually mental health diagnoses. So people can have those features and it not necessarily be a clinical diagnosis.
That is very interesting.
Because people will say sort of the diagnosis that people will often cite is an antisocial personality disorder. But you can have all different types of mental health disorders and have features of all of these things. So what all of those things are what we would call constructs or personality structures.
I see. Is there an overlap in any way?
There is. I mean, the Venn diagram is very complicated, but fundamentally you're going to have a lack of empathy, really either good at relationships insofar as they serve your purpose, but you're probably going to have a trail of very unhappy people behind you.
So what type of person is the target of a person who has that type of personality disorder? Narcissism.
So narcissism, there's also narcissistic personality disorder.
Okay.
So people can have features of narcissism that are really a problem to other people. But the problem with narcissism is that you're not going to seek help or get diagnosed if you don't think you have a problem.
True.
And
True.
narcissists don't think they have a problem.
True.
But those features you're going to find in a lot of different types of people. And people like that are going to, they're almost not going to, they're not going to know what they're doing either. So even if you come with a receipt and a full blueprint of like, you did this, 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 and this, I'm sure we've all experienced that. So we've gone to someone in our life who's like that and gone, but what about this, that, and you feel like it's airtight.
Right.
And it's never, they're slippery almost. They're very slippery. So when you reflect back to them the reality of it, what they do is they sort of distort things. So there's a function that people have called mentalization. And mentalization is sort of like empathy in I can anticipate what your mind is wanting and needing. I can kind of Bluetooth into you in a way. You're a person and we're kind of playing this socio-emotional ping pong game.
Okay.
We're going back and forth, we're having a conversation, we're getting to know each other.
Right.
And that escalates as you get closer. People who have the feature of narcissism or sociopathy or psychopathy, they change the rules of the game in the middle of the game.
Mm.
And so it will be very disorienting. And in my personal experience and my professional experience, I have found that it is almost exclusively high achieving, smart, capable, independent people who end up on the other side of this going, what did I do?
So if we are the person who's like
On the
getting
receiving,
it, if,
interacting
right
with
on the
them.
receiving end, if we are independent and intelligent,
Mhm.
how are we falling for?
Because
How are
we're-
we falling for it?
Because we're people.
Because we're human.
Because we're people. And so people who end up really high achieving and really capable of a lot and really driven and really independent often have a feature or an experience of childhood trauma, not necessarily capital T, big explosion trauma, but a collection of small relational inadequacies or rejections or feeling othered. And you can feel othered even if you're in the wrong neighborhood or if you're, you can have this experience and have an incredibly loving family, but you moved a lot, or there was inconsistencies, or maybe you had a stutter, or the feeling of inadequacy. So there's an overcompensation in being high achieving and productive and smart and capable. So though narcissists almost always have a good kind of radar for that. And they go, this is a person whose Achilles heel is going to be relationships. And so, and as a narcissist too, you're probably pretty competent or presenting as pretty competent.
Right.
So in the beginning, you're going to have this experience of like, oh, I got a partnership. We're like a power couple. We're both really going to do these great things. And then it's going to be these tiny comments like, you're going to wear that?
Mm.
Or sort of, I didn't like the way you talked to me then. These tiny things that are going to throw you off balance and make you feel really insecure about yourself.
Where did that come from?
But also people who are high achieving and really intelligent and capable are used, they have a very, what we would call a high internal locus of control. Because they're also very anxious. So they sort of go like, I got to run everything. I'm in control of everything. I'm in charge of everything because I maybe had to be. So also if you're experiencing this sort of almost funkiness, the poem had mentioned there was a feeling of it. It feels wrong and weird,
Right.
but you ignore it. And then you're going, I'm going to look about what's wrong with me first.
True.
Because I know how to answer that question really well. And so it's almost like these pathologies fall in love.
Okay.
And so the inability to sort of tap into your feelings and sort of ask for help is sort of met with someone who's hyper narcissistic and ready to exploit you.
So they do have a type that they are drawn to.
I haven't looked into the research of this, but I think that those are the stickiest relationships that end up causing the most damage from what I've seen.
And I understand that with narcissism, a lot of times it's rooted in that person's own low self-esteem.
Yeah.
And things of that nature. Could it be that they're targeting people who are exhibiting characteristics that they lack?
Or that they desire.
That they desire.
But also what's really interesting to talk about, people who have narcissistic features or psychopathic features, it's like a sensory deficit because they will come in earnest and go, I don't think I'm doing this. I'm not trying to do this to you. Mm-hmm. But then get in that set of strategies, right? So you have these moments where you're going, I see my partner and maybe they're flawed. Of course, all partners are flawed. And you're wanting to give them, that's sort of how this cycle of abuse is maintained. Because the best way to sort of create dependence is not a predictable pattern of negative consequences. It's an unpredictable pattern of negative consequences. So that's where the sort of love bombing comes in, right? So if he was shitty all the time, no one's staying.
True.
No one stays.
True.
So if there's this sort of sometimes,
Right, yeah.
always, maybe a little bit, okay. And people who have a high internal locus of control go, I am responsible for their behavior. So if I change my behavior, I will elicit something different. So maybe I should have, these are people who will go to extraordinary lengths to sort of get the best out of someone. And that is a good quality that you want in a partner, someone that will think about their role.
Unless you're dealing with a narcissist.
Who does not think about their role.
Does not think about their role. So, and you may not be able to answer this because you're not in the mind of a narcissist, but are they intentionally sidestepping that, or
No.
so they're not?
In my experience, and this might be just because as a therapist, I have to sort of perspective take and unconditional positive regard for my client. But also in my personal life, when I really even gotten into it with something, I'll be like, don't you see? And they don't.
They don't.
Because their strategy, everybody has strategies. And some people will call it manipulation, but everybody manipulates. When a baby cries and it wants its diaper changed, that is manipulation.
It's manipulation.
And that's okay. It is okay. We are communicating with their behavior in order to elicit something else from our environment.
Right.
Most of us have sort of norms around what that is. And what begins with a narcissist is those norms are a little pressured, just a little bit. And then it reminds me of if you give a mouse a cookie. Because even as a therapist, if I have a client who's a narcissist, I have to be careful about my boundaries, about what they will expect from me.
And what do you mean by that?
They will assume that I am their only client, that they are my only client.
Oh.
So they will be late for me, but expect to stay long, not recognizing that I may have another client.
Right.
Or my own life. They will call all the time. They will have expectations about, and it's not from a bad place. It's not, they're not sitting around with a whiteboard and a castle going, like Mr. Burns or something, like they're coming up with this devious plot. They have so few resources to get their needs met. So it's sad for them to, I can empathize that there's a kind of an existential loneliness and emptiness that they have. And of course, when you talk to them, they're going to go, I can imagine the man in that poem going, she was crazy.
Yeah.
She was so erratic.
Yeah.
She just couldn't accept who I was. Because that's, yeah.
So do that type of personality, do they ever truly fall in love?
That is deep. I don't know if I'm qualified to answer. I think they fall in a pattern that is satisfactory and meets needs
For that moment.
Yeah, but some people fall in love in a way that is mutually beneficial and exploitive without necessarily being a narcissist. Not everybody can really be capable of a kind of love that empowers the other person to be more free.
Right.
Which is, of course, what all of us are looking for. But a narcissist is particularly limited in that because what they will see, what love means for them is their way. They get their way. So maybe for them.
Are they born or made?
I think biology loads the gun, environment pulls the trigger.
You got the audience, the whole audience. That went through the whole room. Say that one more time.
I think biology loads the gun, and I think environment pulls the trigger.
Expound on that.
So you can have someone who is born with what would be a genetic propensity for psychopathy, that feature. But these are also people you are going to see are really great at risky things. These are people who are really great at things like performing surgery. These are going to be, I kind of want someone to have a little less empathy if they're going to be doing surgery because it's easy to, they're not going to be losing it over cutting open my body.
Right.
So some of these people naturally become just sort of a jerk, but they found a way to channel it into sort of a risky thing. They sort of take a lot of risks. They're a little impulsive. They maybe lie a little bit and tell stories to make themselves look better. So you can have that feature, but if you're getting your needs met as a child, your emotional needs, and if you're in sort of a warm, relationally rewarding environment, it will be mitigated. It will be mitigated. It will not be exacerbated. But if that genetic propensity is in an environment that's abusive, humiliating, exploitive, full of rejection and loneliness, you're going to be more, it's going to be more dangerous for people. Because I know we all know examples of people who have really horrific childhoods and they go on to become incredibly resilient and wonderful people.
And well-balanced.
Absolutely. And then we have people who sort of have those experiences and then we make that as the reason they're that way, right?
Yeah.
Which is, it's a little reductive, but it's always complicated. But I do think it comes back to separate from even, because we'll often look at like socioeconomic poverty, but relational poverty is a dimension that we often forget about. And I think that if we look at the people who have gone on to create a lot of damage in relationships, they are people who lacked relational wealth in really important times growing up.
Yeah, so that deficit.
Well, because think about it too. You learn who you are by people loving you.
That's true.
You pick up a baby, you smile, the baby learns that they make you happy, and you have this, that ping pong game is happening.
Yeah.
And that child learns they're loved. But if that sort of genetic propensity for that is met with emptiness, chaos, rejection, it's going to be a different story.
Yeah. What support or wisdom do you have for couples where both people have dated narcissists and have been traumatized?
Slow and steady. And I think also that healing is not the same as knowing. So that's also why I see a lot of smart, bright people go, I knew better. Yeah. Why didn't I do something different? And it's because we're not acting from what we know. And if we did, there wouldn't be therapy. I'd send you home with a pamphlet.
Right.
Like, people know what to do. But so if a relationship is what hurt you, the only thing that's going to heal you is a relationship. And so we have to prioritize safety, clarity, predictability, and stability.
Right.
And so the action of doing something almost non-knowy, non-cognitive, like writing, like poetry, like what you guys did for each other.
Right.
And I appreciate too, even in the conversation about as two writers, there wasn't even any push or pull about proprietary stuff because you were healing one another.
True.
The act of sharing that story, it wasn't about who was doing more. It was, you were connecting and you were seeking to connect more.
True.
So I think of just a delicate sprout of a relationship. And there's got to be a lot of care and clarity and predictability are sort of the antidote to the manipulation and obfuscation that narcissism provides. And what I would also say is that there's going to be a fear of conflict in a relationship like that, a huge fear of conflict. But conflict is the only way we're going to get closer.
So how should they address conflict?
We have to talk about the repair. So it's not the first conversation where we got something right. Any relationship, you're going to get to know each other and you're like, oh, well, I thought, there's a mismatch. We're in the best relationship. So it matters, how are we going to come back together? So when a couple says they've never fought, great, you don't know each other.
Yeah.
Let me know after you fought. I want a big, giant fight. And then you're also going to feel safer. After you show maybe your least attractive part to them, that you're needy and clingy and reactive and sad and angry, and they come back.
The strength of a relationship isn't necessarily rooted in the good times. It's rooted in the bad times.
100%.
Yeah. How do you bring it back together? How do you?
My favorite part of my relationship is how we do conflict.
Yeah.
And that's when I knew that this is a man I can fight with.
Yes.
So that's how you go, okay, yeah, we're going to fight.
Yeah.
We're going to have bad days or miscommunications but how are we going to fight?
Yeah.
And the second conversation matters more than the first. And that, even when we're talking about attachment, you know how we measure attachment? We make mom leave the room.
Mm.
And then we see how baby responds when mom comes back.
Right.
So if someone is securely attached, if they can tolerate that. But even think about a material. Materials are stronger if they're flexible.
That's very true.
So if you're really in a secure relationship, I don't really care if your ex has liked something on Instagram. Okay.
Right.
I feel secure.
I feel secure.
Yeah. But a narcissist will reveal themselves in conflict.
Mm. In what ways?
I think narcissists usually, there's a slipperiness of the accountability.
Mm.
It's always an accusation that, well, if you hadn't have done this, then I wouldn't have done this.
The blame.
Well, also that there's no world in which they have responsibility for their behavior. Or there's also an absence of curiosity about your experience.
Like how you're impacted by.
Like, what was that like for you when I said that?
Yeah.
What part of what happened upset you the most?
Yeah, you won't hear those questions.
Because there is also kind of a fundamental lack of curiosity with a narcissist because they're just not that interested.
Yeah. So is there a way to, if you're listening to this podcast and you realize, oh my gosh, I'm in a relationship with a narcissist, this is what it is. How does a person cope and live peaceably?
The first part is that you need to stop judging yourself or blaming yourself for being in this situation. It is not an indicator of weakness. It is not an indicator of stupidity. It is not an indicator. It's nothing to be embarrassed by. It is one of the most universal experiences of some of the strongest people I've ever met. But it is an invitation to look at that first wound.
Yeah.
It is an invitation to look at, why was I so vulnerable to this?
Right. Right.
And it is, again, not about knowing, because that is the thing that I knew better. It doesn't matter. I got all these letters after my name. It's still, I knew better. It's still like,
exactly.
You still do it because there's a humanness to it. So again, the only way you're going to heal is with another relationship.
With a healthy relationship.
Or relationships, your family, your friends, your community. Your reminder in yourself that actually this is my greatest asset that I loved daringly.
Yeah.
That is his great things about me, that I tried to contort myself and make myself available and consider. And because also what's happening is these are a group of people that are up all night doing research on narcissism. How can I sense it? What can I do? What if maybe if I do this a little bit different? We're trying to really manipulate it and we're clinging. And there's something about when you let go, and if that's with spirituality, if that's with your family, if that's with art, if you get away from that knowing part and you sort of come back to yourself, because you get so small when you're in this and you don't recognize yourself and you become reactive. And I mean, I would venture to guess, there's physiological changes. Your sleep is bad. Your appetite is bad. You're restless because it's
stressful.
We're dealing with an attachment wound.
Yeah. Yeah.
So baby yourself.
Be gentle.
Be gentle.
Yeah.
And this is such a universal thing. This is so human. And it happens to I remember being like, I know better. And it just, or thinking that it was about me.
So is narcissism new? It seems like it's like the buzzword. Like for every relationship that, where you're dealing with somebody who's a little troubled, it's narcissism. Like 15 years ago, I had never heard that word.
Well, they were still there.
We just didn't know what to call it.
We didn't know what to call it. And I think what also is happening is more often than not, what I am experiencing as a clinician is that if I have a new client and they come in real hot wanting to talk about how wrong they've been by everybody, my mom's a narcissist, my boyfriend's a narcissist, my dentist is a narcissist, everyone's a narcissist. They're probably the narcissist.
I'm just kidding.
It's like that roommate thing that if you're just, you might be the bad roommate. So, because what that person is experiencing is they're asking me to be accountable. They're telling me I do something wrong. They're not giving me like an endless amount of validation. They're having boundaries. And so we have to be mindful of how when we as a general public, a healthy general public, get access to therapy terms, so do the unhealthy people. And so they can weaponize it very often. And so you can end up, there's a really funny, I think, meme out there about like the worst person you know is in therapy, learning how to weaponize therapy speak and calling themselves an empath.
Mm.
How many times have we been with somebody and you're like, I don't think feeling too much is your problem. Right. So I think it's becoming interesting for me. I don't know. It's not really new, but I think we're able to. I also think women are talking more about it as a type of violence that has not been seen as valid
Yeah.
or real.
Because it is that.
Oh, yeah.
It is that.
Yeah. And it can often, not all narcissists are abusive, but if you're abusive, you're a narcissist.
Exactly. Emotionally, mentally.
Well, it begins
abusive.
that way. And then it can get, so I think the more we're even looking at violence against people or interpersonal violence, we're having to acknowledge that these are the features of a person who is at high risk to do some real damage.
What if the narcissist is your mom or your dad?
Come see me. That is very, like, you don't have to be mentally well to be a parent.
Yeah.
And that is a much more complicated journey because again, these are always complicated journeys because it's not like this person is all bad or all good. But also a lot of our parents came by the way they were, quite honestly. Like, parenting has only been a verb for about 40 years.
Mm.
Before, it was just keeping the kid alive.
Yeah.
And so you're going to have, there's going to be a generational gap, and sort of you're going, hey, I have emotional needs. And the next generation is going, I didn't even know what those were.
Right. Right.
So I think we're moving in the right direction, but there's, if your parent was a narcissist, that is I wouldn't be surprised if that also begat a pattern of finding narcissistic relationships.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
What are some words of wisdom that you can give to the child of a narcissist, an adult? Now they're an adult. What are some words of wisdom that you can give to them?
They wouldn't have been a different parent if you were a different child.
Yeah.
There was not a grade. There was not a size. There was not a face. There's nothing you could have done. And so accepting that this is them. And also, they're your parent and they're your family. So there's often this sort of accepting, this is what I have, and I have to love them where they are. And I maybe have to be the mom that my mom didn't have.
That's powerful.
It's hard, though. It's hard. I say this like it's sort of, but it is, or I have to exhibit the kind of caregiving that I wished I had gotten.
So how important for a person that's in that position, how important are having your own boundaries when it comes to that person?
It can't happen without the boundaries. And it has to be clear. And boundaries don't mean ghosting. Just so boundary, because what will happen is people will do this sort of narcissistic behavior and they'll be like, well, it's my boundary that she doesn't bother me unless I want. Like,
Right.
Okay, you're misusing that term.
Right.
I think with your parent, you need to stop going to a well that doesn't have water. And like, my parent is it's not going to change. So this is a game of acceptance right now.
Right. Stop expecting something from them that it's very clear that they're incapable of giving.
Because they maybe didn't get.
Yeah.
I have found too with clients that it's been incredibly revelatory to learn about their parents' childhood.
And how is that relevant?
Because it makes you go, oh, that sounds awful. Why would you be good at this?
Right.
And it's not as an excuse, but it's an expansion of sort of what you're seeing. And as we get older, you are expanding how you see your family and what their limits are. And I think that is part of the journey of seeing your parents as human and fallible and limited, and having maybe experienced some really terrible things. So it gives you, I think, because what we're looking for is that gooey, compassionate core that is the biggest part of ourselves, to go that actually I don't need them to love me back if I'm going to love them. Because the act of loving them is what's good for me. And maybe this is the best they can do. And that's it. That sort of, there is not a different version of yourself you could have been to get more.
So how can people get in touch with you?
I have a website that is KatharineMPerry.com. Katharine is spelled KATHARINE, MPERRY.com. My email is Katharine, KATHARINE.perry86@gmail.com. I'm currently working at Chattanooga Recovery Center, and we'll start taking private clients soon.
I thank you so very much.
Sure.
This has been such an enlightening conversation. And I thank you so very much for your time.
Of course. Thank you for having me. This has been such a joy.
Yeah. As we conclude another insightful episode of One Rhyme at a Time, I want to thank our featured poet, Jamnjaq, our guest mental health professional, Katharine Perry, our studio audience, and of course you, our listeners, for joining us in this conversation. And we'd like to hear from you. Have you encountered someone with narcissistic tendencies? How did it make you feel? And how did you cope? How have you healed? Tell us in an original poem that you've written in response to this podcast, and submit your poem to RNCPoetry@gmail.com for the chance to have your poem read on an upcoming episode. So until next time, this is the Poetic Diva. May your days be filled with inspiration, healing, and poetry, one rhyme at a time. The primary national mental health hotline for support year-round is 988. Call or text 988, or you can visit 988lifeline.org/chat to access the online chat service. This number, also known as the 988 Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, provides 24/7 access to free, confidential support for those experiencing mental health crisis or those considering suicide. You can call, text, or chat with a trained counselor.